and welcome to So Many Games, independent video game coverage from a passionate group of people. Please check out everything we do at somanygames.co.uk. My name is Jason, and for episode 9 of the podcast, I was honoured to be joined by Remy Siu, the creative director of the outstanding video game 1000xRESIST. We had an amazing conversation on the game, from its inspirations to its design, plus its upcoming release on the Xbox Series SX, Game Pass and PS5. And as 1000xRESIST is one of my favourite games, it was quite surreal to have the chance to talk to Remy, and as you'll hear, he still carries a strong passion and enthusiasm for the game. Before we do join Remy, I do have an announcement. We are launching a Patreon. The sole reason being to help contribute towards not only the running costs of the website, but also to help with my goal to pay all our amazing writers for their hard work and incredible writing. They do all this for the love of video games in their spare time, and it would be amazing to be able to pay them for their work. We plan to have 3 tiers available starting from £1, with the highest being £8 a month. The most exciting part is that we have been very kindly given Steam codes to give out to people who subscribe to our middle and highest tiers in the launch week window. These games are Ultros, Arranger, a role-puzzling adventure, Fading Serenades, and Paperclay. A huge, huge thank you to the developers for kindly donating these codes to us. So please keep an eye out on our socials for updates to when this all goes live. Also, if you do enjoy this episode, we would love for you to leave a review and a 5-star rating on your podcast platform. It would really help us to be discovered by more people and encourage the algorithms to promote the podcast. And then with all that out of the way, let's join up with Remy and our discussion on 1000xRESIST. All right, everyone, it gives me much pleasure to welcome Remy Siu to the podcast. Heikki Grace, Remy, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, Heikki Grace, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Yeah. It's a big honour for me to actually be talking to you, just because of 1000xRESIST. It's a beautiful, amazing game, and so to have you here and for me to be able to talk to you in real time is a great honour. So thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
Of course, thank you for having me on.
So to start, I wondered if you could just give a little introduction for the listeners, your role at Sunset Visitor and on 1000xRESIST.
Yeah, so my name is Remy Siu, and I'm the creative director here at Sunset Visitor Studios, and I also founded the studio prior to working in games, I guess, and founding the studio. I was a performing artist. I trained in music, and then I went to do a lot of experimental theater, and then also new media arts like creative coding and doing kind of projection mappy type adjacent things. And my role on 1000xRESIST was, we're a small studio, so it wear a lot of hats. So my role would be to be working in Unity, constructing a lot of say the experience of the game and say, the communions, a kind of movement of the game, and also working as a writer, a VO director, and some other stuff, I'm sure. And then also finding the money, which, is its own thing.
Yeah, so it sounds like you had your fingers in lots of different areas of the game. Was there a particular area that you enjoyed more so over other areas of developing the game?
Well, what I really liked, because I didn't have to do as much work, was working with the composers, because I guess my background is in music, and so it was really nice to kind of work with both our composers, Lynn and Drew, who were always kind of bringing some really interesting music to our sessions to listen to, and we got to talk about it, and it was always exciting. And so I think that was one of the most relaxing parts for sure of making the game. And I really enjoyed writing But that's like always a double-edged sword. Yeah. Sometimes you enjoy writing more in retrospect.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you bring up the soundtrack, and
Mhm.
what was it like for you when you first heard the pieces of music that were being created for your game?
Yeah, so I think it was wild because I think the first time I heard some stuff from Lynn, I was like, whoa, I think like Lynn had gotten also like a new synth recently, and so she was like really excited to play with it. And I think specifically when I heard the Orchard theme for the first time, which was I think one of the first things that Drew worked on, and it was kind of delivered in two sides. So it was like I think it was a Dorian version of it, and then like an A minor version of it. And those are pretty much what you hear for the orchard themes when you're in the orchard. And I think that was the first time when I was like, oh yeah, like I think the music identity is forming, and that really informed us as people who were working in the development side of it. And while we were still making the game, it was nice to have this music come in and then like kind of ground us in that way.
In some instances, you probably fed off the music, but it kind of
Yeah.
made the game more so because you heard the music.
Yeah, well, for sure. Like we would sometimes listen to these things on loop while we were writing. And then also we would pipe in the music for the voice actors sometimes into the booth while they were
Oh, okay.
performing,
Yeah.
so that they could hear the music for the section that they may be performing in. So that was nice because they could like kind of adjust their rhythms to it a little bit, or yeah, all
That
those
sounds
kind of
quite,
like porous parts.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that sounds quite unique. I mean, obviously, I'm no expert on voice
Mm.
acting and for video games or for other projects, but that sounds quite a unique way of doing it. But I think the outcome really shines through on the game and the acting itself.
I think it's just as a performer, it's kind of fun, at least for me, to have the music and play along with it.
Mm, yeah,
So much of the stuff that we used to do back in the day was like movement based on stage. And so like music was such a big part of it. And so, having sound kind of like inform the energy or the flow of something is really helpful as a performer. I think
sure.
I didn't do the movement stuff. I was doing music stuff, but like,
Yeah,
even then, like kind of helping to do the composition overall, say, of what's happening on stage, like without sound, it really feels like it's something is not there. But that being said, I'm also very like music brained.
hmm
So
yeah,
yeah.
fair enough. And like, while we're on the subject of the soundtrack, I mean, we've already gone off
Mm.
tangent off my question, so I
Yeah.
think this is a record for
Sorry.
me. No, you're
Yeah.
you're all good.
Yeah.
But like, I always remember when I bought the soundtrack on Bandcamp, and it just blew me
Mm.
away on how much music that actually is in the soundtrack. It was incredible. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's over 4 hours of music
Yes.
just for the
Yeah.
game, and that's just it
It's
was just
almost like half the length of the game, or 33%
yeah,
of the length of
exactly,
the
yeah,
game, like sequentially laid out.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it blew me away. So it's just another incredible ingredient, I guess, in the game, and just something that I really appreciated. I think just the size of this soundtrack for, I guess, at this time, and it was while you was developing, I guess, quite an unknown project. So yeah, really,
Yeah.
really cool. But yeah, as I said, we've already gone on a slight tangent there, but just bringing it right
Mm.
back. If anyone doesn't know what 1000 times resist is, then can you give them the pitch?
Oh yeah, okay. I'm really bad at this. I feel like at this point I should get better at this. And like I always give it differently, which is bad also. So I think the pitch for 1000 times resist is that it's a sci-fi narrative game where you play as a clone that lives in a society of clones in a very strange future where you worship the original copy called the All Mother, and you are living in this society kind of underground, you don't know, and on the surface humanity has been it's deceased largely because of a arrival of entities known as the occupants that have spread a very bad disease that makes you cry until you die, I suppose. And so it's a very narrative focused game, and our desire is that it always goes places that you don't think it will go.
Like you gave there a very obviously a very basic description of the game, which is necessary, I think, obviously because of
Mm.
all the narrative points that happen throughout the game. You don't want these to be spoiled. So, but even that basic synopsis of the game, even now, I mean, I played it twice, and it's still like
Oh wow.
and it kind of still
Mhm.
makes me in my head a little bit go, yeah, that's just a really cool plot line.
Oh, thanks.
Well, I'm kind of a bit of a a sci-fi nerd. I love all the kind of
Mm-hmm.
science fiction films and games and stuff. So I'm
Mm-hmm,
always
mm-hmm,
like automatically attracted to those kind of narratives, I guess. But
mm-hmm.
I just love the originality through the game of 1000 times resist. Even though it still contains elements that we've all seen before. Aliens, viruses, and
Mm-hmm.
such, and even
Mm-hmm.
clones to a certain degree. But the way I
Mm-hmm.
think in which you guys kind of melded them all together and like create this really unique universe was
Mm-hmm.
incredible, really. And like I said, even though playing it through the second time, it was still quite mind blowing, really. But I guess what I'm trying to get around to asking is these themes and like these kind of science fiction elements,
Mm-hmm.
were they always there, or was it kind of came in as you kind of started developing the game?
I think the science, like the thought that the thing was, science fiction or speculative fiction, science fiction along more like soft science fiction and like more magical realism adjacent to a degree. That was always kind of known. We knew that, for example, would not be like super hard sci-fi, even though we wanted the world to be coherent with itself. I think, as it went, it definitely developed more and more and more, and like we got to kind of touch on more things and got to connect themes in ways that were surprising for us because we were kind of making it one chapter at a time, like quite sequentially. But yeah, I think the science fiction element has always been a part of it. And I think also I'm just science fiction brained as well, and so it's just something that, like, when I think about fiction, or when I think about fiction as some degree lying and pretending,
Mhm.
I think like I am thinking in science fictiony terms always. I don't know why. Maybe it's just I like to think about uh the future more than I do about perhaps like the deep past of something or
Mhm.
or our deep past perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously you sat down to make this game, and like,
Mm.
what was kind of like your main goals? What was the biggest goals you wanted to achieve with
Yeah.
making this game?
I think when we sat down, I remember quite early on, I was like, okay, well, we are going to make a narrative adventure game, right? Like, and very much one that is descendant from things like the point and click adventure games that I played when I was younger. So descended from like Grim Fandango, descended from more contemporaneous examples like Kentucky Route Zero, and but I do remember saying specifically to everybody that, like, okay, well, because we are not interested in more systemic mechanical things, this allows us to really focus on storytelling in a way that we can kind of pack it in, and that it can be driven by that logic. And then also I remember kind of just describing it to the team as like, oh yeah, like a Final Fantasy length story in 15 hours as opposed to in 60, right?
Yeah.
Because like we're just taking out all the parts where you might be moving from point A to point B, and there's random battles and stuff like this, and all the parts that may be inside of a Final Fantasy game because of the genre that it the mechanical genre that it lives in.
Mm.
So that was one thing. It's like, can we do that scope of storytelling because we've kind of sacrificed on the altar a like main mechanical game design brained logic of how things should unfold temporally and formally, structure wise, you know. So I think it freed us a lot, but it was very scary. You know,
Yeah, I
like
bet.
you're just
Yeah.
like, oh my god, like I would love for like a random battle right now for pacing purposes, you know, like it
Yeah.
would be so great. But yeah.
Did you ever try that?
No, we didn't. I think it was just like never something that we had scope for, nor was it something that, you know, like it was working as intended, where we were like, oh damn, okay, for pacing purposes, and we don't have like a core mechanical loop to fall back on, and so we have to think about it more in storytelling terms and what needs to go here and how does this unfold in a more macro way to adjust for the fact that yeah, because the story's not just like happening at one point, it's like happening all the time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
Yeah, I can. If I think about it properly, I think jumping into a
Mm.
battle, Watcher versus the Principal or something. I
Yeah.
think it might be quite a jarring experience. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm glad you didn't explore that side of it. So yeah, that's really interesting to hear what your goals were with the game, and I think you definitely hit those goals throughout the game. Don't think you missed a beat in any part of the game. I don't think it was always so much on point. But one of the other aspects of the game that was really on point was its visuals. Throughout, it's just stunning. Like the creativity and the world building just from the visuals were a real highlight as well of the game. And what really brought it out, I think, was your use of the colors, the camera angles, just some like really original ideas coming through just through on the
Mm.
visuals. And like, how did this evolve from the beginning of development to the end?
Yeah, I think it evolved quite a well. You know, I would say that like quite early on when we were doing tools and systems for making the game, you know, I think the idea to be able to have a camera that could freely cut and move and all that stuff was implemented quite early on, and then also I think the various character control schemes like side scrolling and top down and whatnot. All of that stuff was implemented quite early on. It was some of the first things we worked on. But I think in terms of how it looked, it did go through quite a bit of change overall, and I think it was part of us just like us being able to we were getting better at doing it as we were doing it, which is classic. And I also think that somewhere along the way, I kind of just was leaned into. Well, you know, maybe it was right from the beginning. I think the biggest discovery when it started to feel like, oh, you know, this starts to feel resonant with some of the things that we were doing in performance before that, before starting the game or before like, you know, starting the studio, was that specific moment when you're chasing Zhao at the end of chapter 1
Yep.
and you have to use the time changing
Hmm.
mechanic to move through the different states, and she's standing under the spotlights or the street lights, and it
Hmm.
keeps like kind of moving, and that kind of thing was the first time where I was like, oh, this feels like experimental theater to me, you know, like
Yeah.
or as I understand it, or it like carries that energy, and so much of it had to do with like tone, color, light. And even though there's like an environment, like really when you think about what's going on in that scene, it's like there's like the blue, there's the very clear light, and there's a figure that's moving, right? And I think when that was discovered, it was like, okay, well, I think then we can start to, it just, at least in my brain, start to open doors back to like, okay, well, like much like the cave sequence in chapter 4, it's like,
Hmm.
okay, well, these are staged in a very specific way. You're moving through these spaces that are kind of prepared for you, and yeah, over time it was just being able to tap into some of that stuff, and I think also additionally, as we were going, we were getting better at depicting or just realizing the overall tone of the world.
Yeah, you bring out that Zhao moment in chapter one,
Mm,
and I think, like you say, it was one of the first instances where I was like, oh wow, this is cool. Like
mm,
what was happening on the screen and using the time shifts to to progress the narrative, and like it's I can visually clearly see it in my brain right now because of the color schemes, because of the uniqueness of the systems that are in place, and the words, you're writing as well. All those elements coming together in such a short instance just made for such an unforgettable moment of the game. It's just quite incredible. You must have been
thank
really
you.
pleased when all that came together and you saw it for the first time.
Well, we were just chasing it, I think, we when so many of this when once we kind of figured it out, so much of it was like uh, got down to the technical aspect of the art making, and that I can't remember how many streetlights there are. It's like maybe like 17 or something like this. And I remember working with Pinky, another writer on our game, just being like, okay, this is now like really in the territory. It felt like in the territory of things we're used to working in our previous practice, where it's like, all right, we have 17 things, 17 little beats that we can space out this whole conversation in. Like, how do we structure it? How do we um, really slowly kind of build a form here in the 17 instances that we can have to talk to Zhao, and like and really map it out, and really feel it out. And like, I think, maybe when I say, oh, it starts to feel like experimental theater, what I'm realizing is that it's when we start to discover these constraints that we put on ourselves that become formal opportunities. And this is a good example because it's like, okay, well, we could have done it where it's like Zhao is running away from you, and she's like saying these things as she runs away from you. And it's the classic, you run towards her, and then she like, you talk to her, and then she like runs more, and then
Hmm.
she stops, and then
Yeah.
she runs more. Like that was like a doable version of it. But then when I think at the time I was just like, oh, we don't have to, I don't want to do that right now. So like, let's like, what do we have? Like, what are our tools in front of us? What are other ways that we've been speaking formally? And
Hmm.
that's like the timeline mechanic. And then when that came into place, it's like little slices of time. And then it's like, oh yeah, you only have 17 slices. You have 17 slices to play out this thing. And that felt like a constraint.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, that's cool. Like, that gives us a form to subvert and to play with. And that also is something that the audience understands.
Mm. Yeah, and it's really. I know you have the moment in the school where you're like first introduced to the time mechanic
Mm-hmm,
because you've got to flip between the two different
mm-hmm,
time periods to get into rooms
mm-hmm,
and things like that, or get past obstacles. But I think, like in that instance, in chapter one, in this particular moment, it was a really, really strong introduction to the time skip and what it could actually bring to the game, more so narrative wise, that I really appreciated. And it showed that this time skip could be used in, or maybe, it could be used in other ways that I could
mm-hmm.
maybe hope to see throughout the game,
Yeah.
which it does,
Yeah.
and like with the time skip, actually, while we're on the subject, like
Mm-hmm.
was that always part of the plan as well? Yeah, was that kind of like fed in
Mm-hmm.
throughout, or was it kind of always there?
Definitely it was it was not in the prototype that I had made by myself, because the actual implementation of such was like way beyond my skill to do as like just a solo programmer or like a solo dev. So, but it was something that like we began implementing right away, I think, when we came on with the full team. So yes, to that extent, but it changed quite a lot. I think there was a time when you could, like, the way that it was presented is that you hold a button, like the time index menu comes up, and you can just kind of skip through them,
Hmm.
and then you let go of the button, and then it'll be in that time, but everything will pause in that moment. But I think it was like we had made a change so that like when you now as into what it is now, whereas when you press R1 or L1 or whatever, you immediately just change into the next time. And I think that kind of, I don't know, like stuff like this seems like so obvious in retrospect. It's like, oh yeah, like, like of course it makes sense that you can just press a button, but like and this means that you would have to now like move through things sequentially versus being able to previously kind of like random seek, I guess, the time. So it went through a lot of iterations. Technically, it's like, actually quite a bit of a challenge when it came to optimizing the game for lower spec hardware, and specifically for a kind of lower spec hardware that it was hard when it came to that, and it breaks a lot of assumptions made by the engines, or the engine specifically that we were using, where it's like, oh, there's kind of like one state of the world, so to speak, and coming to some of the levels, especially like chapter 7, I think there was like, I don't know, 90 states of the
Blimey.
world, right? Yeah. And so like it all with their own like lighting setup, all with their own stuff. And like, yeah, I could go into the whole technical aspect of that, but it's kind of, a very simple like science fiction thought, which was like, hey, let's be able to jump between different time periods, kind of had a lot of technical and design ramifications. Right. So, yeah.
Going back to the visual side of it a little bit, I really would like to know a little bit about the designs of the characters and the clothing specifically, like, and even like the masks. What can you tell us about how their designs came to be?
I this credit goes to Kodai. I think Kodai, who's was the artist on the game. I think we had some early references that we were talking about, kind of like things we wanted to orbit around. I know that that kind of future fashion was something that we were both interested in, but many of it was just like prompts, and we kind of really let Kodai go in and do whatever his brain does to come up with these various designs. And they did change every so often, like not, well, definitely they changed from like a micro level. They did not change, say, always from a broad level. Some of them did, but ultimately I think, the prompts that I was kind of giving Kodai at the time, I think it was like pretty simple. It's like, we know there are 5 sisters. I know which colors they are. We can describe a little bit of their personality. Of course, that also changed, over time. And yeah, and then so we just got these pieces of concept art back, and eventually I think we just stopped the whole 2D concept art process altogether. So I would say it's very much inspired by, specifically to more Asian leaning fashion, and the rest of it is really just like, Kodai at work.
Yeah, because I really, through a lot of the cutscenes, like through the conversations, I would just stop and admire the outfits themselves. I really liked their designs and just how unique they were. Like on Principal's, outfit, she just had this big like long bit coming out of her shoulder and such. Yeah. And I always kind of wondered, I was like, is that there just like cosmetic, or is that there for a reason? Is there some kind of technology going on in there that she needs for it and such?
Yeah.
And it kind of brings out your imagination a little bit more. It was really quite cool.
Totally.
I mean, that is just cosmetic, wasn't it? There was no.
I can't confirm or deny. Yeah, it was largely cosmetic. Yeah, it's for fashion. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
It's really cool. And like like I said about the masks as well. I kind of like, like with healers, she had the eye mask as well as the mouth mask, and but the majority of the sisters had just the mouth mask and such. But even then, there was lots of different designs with the masks, and I always kind of wondered why that was. Like, was there a specific reason why they're all different designs? Is it like a sister's personal preference, or Was there another reason behind that?
I think we saw the mask as just another extension of the way in which we could give those sisters personality, especially with Watcher's mask being like the most transparent, being also the player character, and then Healer's mask Healer can be sometimes like a morally gray character
Hmm.
as well. I
Yeah.
guess they're all kind of morally gray characters, and so it really became just another way in which their presence could be expressed.
Okay.
I think it was like a combination of always like eyewear and glasses. Those were like really important things
Yeah.
because we knew like from like a pure humanoid silhouette, they would be similar. So that how could that change based on the fashion?
And just like, the game being so visually strong, like did you have any issues in realizing your ideas to the screen in that subject?
Oh, all the time. All the time. I
Yeah.
think we had to be very smart about using sets that existed. At the time, we were like a really small team working on it.
Hmm.
And with largely, like two people working in engine and like, an artist dipping in and out, like Koda dipping in and out of the engine. And there were so many things that were difficult to achieve. And then even just say like the timeline aspect of it, or even
Hmm.
some of like the volumetric lights, like we kind of
Hmm.
were at a weird triangulation of a bunch of these things where it's like we're an indie game, there's not that many of us, but we're also in 3D, but there's also like it's like a mini open world in the orchard, but then the orchard's like not, it's not outside. Right,
Yeah.
the game kind of takes place entirely indoors,
Yep.
and that changes like the way you can light it sometimes. Like there was always an issue with like too much shadow here, too much shadow there, and we had to like customize the shader to adjust for that. And then also, for example, it would probably feel very bad if in the orchard you like are walking in some part of the orchard and then it like loads the next section of the orchard, right? Like it had to
Hmm.
be kind of all loaded together. And sometimes when you are in like a game like, I don't know, Breath of the Wild or something like this, say like you're outside a lot and the draw distance can change, like things can pop in. And we kind of got used to that as gamers over time, like in the open world, like detail kind of phases in as we move along. But in the orchard, it doesn't feel good, because you're
Hmm.
inside.
Yeah.
Like psychologically as a player, it's like that's weird. Like you have to see everything as it's there, and so that's so many technical challenges I think that we engaged as a small team. Again, like totally born from science fiction thinking.
Sure. Yeah.
um and then like the knockoff effects of that, like it's like sure, because we have indoor environments that are in sci-fi, things like fallout, um the fallout bunker, right? But those are just
Yeah.
often a series of like hallways, so that like optimization wise, like there's nothing better than a series of hallways.
Hmm.
And I think, we also have Mass Effect Citadel, but that can also become a series of hallways as well sometimes.
Yeah.
And like the weird thing about the orchard is like it's an open air thing. So like you can kind of stand on one side of it inside something and look through and see all the
Yeah.
way out to the other thing. So that
That is
was
true.
challenging as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Um,
incredible. There's another image that's always in my brain when I think about 1000xRESIST,
mm,
and it's in one of the communions, I believe, and it's the one where it's like bright orange or like a sunset orange, and you've got all the
mm,
soldiers kind of just suspended in midair in all different shapes and
mm, mm,
angles and
mm,
such, and you've got that kind of like bright light right in the middle,
mm,
looking out at you. That's an image that always stays with me. I feel like that's probably a good example of the. I mean, it looks quite a simple shot in some ways, but I can imagine that's a great
oh yeah,
example of
yeah.
what you're saying with the technical aspects and how
Mm.
hard that must have been to recreate.
So that one is actually like, I think the only technical hard part of that was just the volumetric light that we use, or volumetric lights are kind of expensive, right? Computationally, or graphically expensive. and specifically for like low spec platforms and like older hardware. And that one's interesting because like that particular shot is something I would usually do in real life.
Hmm.
I would fill a stage with fog and haze and whatever, volumize the air, and then I would use a projector, so very sharp digital light, and like shine it, usually often behind, or like use it as a lighting thing, and then like have it behind an object, and so it would light the object from behind. You get the silhouette, and you would get the kind of like rays that emanate from the subject that as they're moving and stuff like this, like it
Hmm.
wouldn't change. And so I was kind of like trying to recreate that thing that I do in
Hmm.
real life,
Yeah.
which is it kind of looks exactly like what it would
Okay,
in real
that's
life,
cool.
which is
Yeah.
nice. And and I think the interesting thing about that is like the lines are quite sharp because of often with projector light, I just call it digital light, quote unquote.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
still light, but the source of it is it's still a lamp also, but it's sharper than the cutoffs are sharper than say more traditional, older, warmer lights. That effect is like very simple in real life, but in the game, it can be a little bit more tricky to set up. And then there's all this technical stuff when it comes to the volumetric light, kind of filling so much
Mm.
of the space that can cause some optimization concerns. But that was something we definitely wanted to figure out because that was such a signature part of
Mhm.
the way we were lighting the game. Like that shot that you're talking about is just like a single light source, and I think it's kind of rare. Like I don't know, like it feels like when I think of other games, I don't know why they don't do this as much, but it always feels like there's multiple light sources, and it's like sometimes some of the lighting is simulation based, right? And based on like a simulation of the space that they've built, where I think maybe this is where we diverge, and we're like, okay, now yeah, let's just light it with this one
Yeah.
thing. And like also in that scene, I think the exposure is quite low because the light itself is quite bright, so everything around it is like really dark. So it's like it doesn't matter that you can't see that other stuff, right? Like mechanically in the game, and then also like aesthetically, I suppose.
I think all those different kind of lights really work in that shot, though. I think it really brings out the soldiers, but then you can
Mm,
still see the orange. You can still
mm,
catch the colors of Watcher and everything. It's
mm,
just a whole like visual feast going on.
mm,
And it was it hard, because I guess a lot of developers would be tempted in a shot like that to not make the soldiers a 3D model. Maybe they
mm,
would try and cut it down for development time or for performance issues.
mm.
Or I think I remember rightly, they were all 3D. The soldiers are 3D models. So
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
I've
yeah,
got a
yeah,
memory
yeah,
of like
yeah,
kind of
yeah. Mm-hmm.
panning the camera around to see
Mm-hmm.
and to
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
these are all
Mm-hmm.
actually like 3D models as well. So that must
Mm-hmm.
have been quite
Mm-hmm.
a technical feat for you to make them all 3D but not affect the performance of the game.
Oh, we decimated those models so hard. It was thankfully, like they're thankfully they're silhouetted, so it's like
Yeah,
you can't really see much detail
sure.
on them. But we went through many passes of just trying to like make those models be more, because that particular shot that you're talking about was a performance pain point. There was like uh, throughout development, that scene was always kind of chugging along a little bit
Mm,
because of the volumetric light, and then also because of the yeah, how many models there are.
mm,
I think it was worth it though, because like it's one of those. It's both at the same time one of those things that I would do in real life in performance, like the lighting source, like a single lighting source, like very harsh, using a kind of like cone digital light and silhouetting an object or like placing it right behind an object. But simultaneously, it's also something that I could never do in theater, where it's like you have those subjects that are like floating in the air,
yeah,
and they're all
exactly.
kind
Yeah,
of like slowly moving up, and like you could do that, like it's doable. Like I know how I would do that in real life, and what I would have to set up to do that,
lots of
but you
wires.
rarely get to do that Yeah.
Yeah.
You rarely get the opportunity to do that, because then of course, if you do that in stage, at least in Canada, there would be like a lot of insurance audience safety concerns.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Anything something's hanging like that and moves.
Let alone 20 individual people. Yeah,
Yeah.
the insurance men would be sweating, definitely.
Oh yes, for sure. Yeah.
So I've just got a couple more questions, and then we'll move into the community ones quickly afterwards. And the first one is just about the communions themselves. Like, there was such a clever way to introduce the player to the backstory of, Iris and the kind of person that she was, and and how she became the All Mother. But it also did it in such a way in which it kept the player engaged throughout. I played quite a lot of games, especially narrative-heavy games, where they just throw a lot of information at you in kind of a short space of time. And sometimes it can be quite overwhelming as a player, I guess, especially when it can be such a complicated, maybe storyline, a bit like 1000xRESIST, because you're trying to feed through a lot of different ingredients, But was it always the plan to do this kind of backstory in a communion style, or did you have other ideas that you were trying to do that in?
No, I think it was always the plan for sure. I think the communions provide a nice little way in which it's both about being able to learn about that stuff, but it's also like a nice little formal container to keep shifting genre.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like from a more, again, like music brained version of it. It's like, oh yeah, okay, like now we can completely change the way in which we may approach a communion. And I think there was a very early desire that, even though 1000xRESIST could be class, like, could be called a walking simulator, right? Because you do walk a lot in the game. Like, I think one of the things that I had kind of gotten over at that point was like walking simulators where a majority of the content is like through audio logs or through kind of like, these things you read or are left behind, or it's like, it's not like literally happening in front of you right now. And I totally understand why, like from a production perspective, why that was approached. And like, especially when you think about some of these are so descendant from immersive sims. And those are such important part of immersive sims. And I like really enjoyed it when I first encountered them and I played them. But I think these days, my desire is for like the narrative to unfold in front of the player, as opposed to, the player kind of being like visiting. It's funny because like when you think about it, that's actually what Watcher is doing, right? But the method of way in which it may like be doled out is slightly different. Like those people are there, and yeah, like I mean, I think chapter 9 is maybe the ode to that style of thing, because like that's like straight up a nice little homage to like how they would do it in BioShock or like do it in System Shock. Like you get there and it's like everybody's dead, and
Yeah.
you got and you kind of listen to logs, but in that way we got to do it in a fun way where it's like kind of also like with our time, the time mechanic as well. So
Yeah, you definitely kept us on our toes with like the different like genres you threw in. Kind of wasn't sure what to expect next in some ways, with first person perspective, side on screen, the camera behind the shoulder, like the standard view and stuff like that. I was kind of half expecting a Metal Gear Solid kind of
Codex Call,
top down kind of
top down, yeah
thing,
yeah,
which would have been cool.
yeah.
But I guess you're saving that for the sequel.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a couple left on the table. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, for my last question is just about the world building, really, in general. Like, as a sci-fi nerd, like I said at the beginning, it must be really hard to kind of try and come up with something original. Like many people have kind of explored quite a lot of the corners in science fiction. But when I played 1000xRESIST, I mean, it's such an incredibly unique and original world. how long did it take to come up with the concept of this world? Of the All Mother, the occupants, and all the other elements that went into creating it.
I think it took like as long as it took to make the game.
Okay, yeah,
Well, in the sense that like we were making it a chapter at a time, so episode at a time,
mm.
and we were sometimes chasing our own concepts that we were bringing up. We knew like the premise, right? Like at a certain point, like after chapter 1. But yeah, like world building wise, it's really like it's this thing that I call it like internally I'm just like, oh yeah, it's like folding steel. Like you fold it once, and then you fold it again, and then you fold it again, and then you fold it again, and then as you keep folding it, you're like, oh, like these connections can be made, or like this has more. These things start to like coalesce in weird ways, that you didn't anticipate, and I think especially when it comes to sci-fi ideas or like ways in which they're represented. Like I guess sci-fi is old enough now, in the same way that video games are old enough now, but like still much significantly younger. That there are these things that you can always reference and play with and subvert and articulate in different ways. And maybe that's kind of where like again the music brain was really helpful, where it's like, okay, well, like we've heard this specific chord before, like the pitch contents of this chord, but like how has it been voiced before, and like how can you voice it, and how can you move to the next event, and like how can you create variations on it, how do you articulate it, how are all of the ways in which these things are. Because for example, as you said, like there are other science fiction, of course, things with clones in them, right? But I think it's just articulated differently, and this is the fun part of science fiction, is that you can take these and you get to start articulating it in ways that are interesting to you. But that also takes a long time. That takes a long time. Like we're working on something, on new things, and one of these things that we're working on is to nobody's surprise, like science fiction of some kind. And it's like and specifically it is engaging with certain science fiction things that are almost classical, you know.
Mm.
And then it's just the challenge of like, okay, well, how do we voice and articulate this again to in a way that's worthwhile? Because we think engaging in this classical thing is worthwhile right now, but like we still have to find it, and it takes time, and it's hard, and it's like you have to like mess around
Sure.
and accidentally do something sometimes. Like, oh, that's interesting, like
Yeah.
like and so much of it is like mood and tone, I think going back and thinking about something that was really influential is like I always think about Adventure Time, right? Like Adventure Time, like especially in the later seasons, the way it articulates a lot of these science fiction things that it engages with is like so fresh. You're
Mm.
just like, wow, like that.
Yeah.
Like I've not seen it articulated like that, and that kind of, and there's a joy to it that I think was really influential to me. So we're always kind of seeking like, okay, how can we articulate some of these things that may be classical in a way that is joyful to us?
Like I said, I've just got a couple of questions from the community I'd like to ask. And the first comes from Matt, aka Stormageddon. And he asks, what was the most surprising thing to you that the fans of the game resonated with?
Oh, that's a good question. What is the most surprising thing? The Bobo memes are pretty pretty funny to me.
Yeah.
That was like, I was like, okay, yeah, I knew that would shock people, but now there's like these Bobo memes, microwave memes
Mm-hmm.
in the in our Discord, which I think it's really funny. I actually think that the stuff that we go back and, sorry, like the events of like chapter 6, where like you start to see some more real world stuff, especially regarding Hong Kong. There was always, when in development, right, it's always like, how do I say this, like if you have a commercial brained thing, or like if you're commercially brained, perhaps it's not the thing to do
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is. Like, that's maybe I'm just assuming this is just like but I think we definitely knew that like this was like part of just our practice in general. Like, we talk about real world things in abstractions, and then make them very literal sometimes. And but I knew that was something that was maybe not something people were used to, or I don't know. Like, again, it was just like maybe from like a high level commercial place, it was like presumed not to be the thing to do. But I think people have really resonated with that aspect of the game, and that it goes there and that it's willing to do those things, which has always been, my feeling about that.
Mm.
But kind of seeing that kind of thing embraced has been really delightfully surprising.
Yeah. Real Dave Jackson has asked, since the Sunset Visitor team has lots of experience in other art forms, how was your experience of connecting with your audience different this time around? Was it more or less immediate, more or less intense, etc.? He continues, the game has touched a lot of people, himself included, and I can't thank you enough for making it happen.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's quite different because, it's like October 2025 and the game released in May 2024. And we still get to talk about it. And we're talking about it right now,
Yeah.
Like, that's already very different than my experience of other, like in my previous work, because like most of that lived on stage of some kind, or like specifically in performance. And, there was video documentation, but sometimes but like that stuff never transfers well to video documentation, right? Like, you
Mm.
really have to be there. And I think, in many ways it feels simultaneously less intense and more intense, because like we've never had like, I would say that, we've always been, and especially myself, my interest of it is like always putting these little details inside the work that, and like I'm used to like nobody ever seeing those, or thinking about them,
Mm.
and or seeing them, but like last week or this week, I saw somebody post on BlueSky that they had finally seen the little joke of the one of the kids on the laptop is doing something, and then what they're doing is like using Unity.
Mm-hmm.
um and that was the thing, is like, I'm gonna put this in here because it's a fun little detail that I think I like it. And normally in, my other things that I did, like, that's just not something that people will find.
Yeah.
But then now it's like, okay, well, people do find it, and like all these little details. So
Yeah.
basically, for better or for worse, maybe it reaffirms that these little details that we put effort into to including is recognized. So it's intense in that way, but it's less intense from like, when you're on stage and like you're literally like you're a meter away from like 100 people.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That must be quite a daunting thing.
You kind of get used to it, because it's like, it's hard to see them sometimes, which is great.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, for the last question then is from the Shock Monkey, and they ask, one of the questions that plays on his mind about the game is why you chose the direction you did for the gameplay. It was really unique.
Mm.
Put the story as a central focus and was almost minimal in the actual interactivity at times, but it still conveyed so much. So how did you choose the direction you did for the gameplay?
I think it's a little bit like what I said earlier in this podcast, where being able to remove a lot of things about what people think are what video games are, um,
Yeah.
gave us a lot of space. The absence of that gave us a lot of space to uh, allow the story to play out in a way that would be hard to if we were distracted by those things. And then it allowed us to have room to like have to, because of its absence, we had to invent things to fill its absence. And then also to feel our way around that absence, and like what it meant to not have those things, and come up with new solutions. But I think specifically this is something that I'm always interested in. I know that there are a lot of like, when you think about quote unquote innovations, you think about like pretty big, what do they call them? Like USPs, right?
Sure.
Like you think
Yeah.
about like, wow, this game has like five, I can't even think of one, like five, I don't know. Yeah, basically what I'm saying is that like those games, when they say they are innovating, often may be innovating from a very high level, right? A very high macro level. And that's cool. I think one thing that seemingly I can't stop doing is that like there's always these little bits of things left on the table, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and if they're left on the table, there's like a whole universe in there to explore that we haven't yet explored. And it's not as shiny as being like, oh, I procedurally generated, some. Okay, again, I just bring that up as an example. I'm not saying like I love procedurally generated games too.
Sure.
It's just like just the level of difference, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, one is like quite a huge encompassing version of it, and one is just like the tiny bits that are left behind by something, sometimes often by accident.
Mm-hmm.
And I love going at those bits. And in many ways, when you think about something like Gone Home or even the emergence of walking simulators, it's kind of the leftover bits of like what was driving more action packed kind of mechanical gameplay. But like it's very like something like Gone Home is like pretty directly descendant from BioShock, right?
Mm.
And then that was descendant of all these immersive sims. But specifically, so let's just say in BioShock, like what if we were doing some of these things but not shooting people in the face? Like
Yeah.
that's like a tiny thing left on the table. It's like, well, what type of stories could we tell if we did that, or like what type of
Sure.
things could we realize if we didn't do that? Like that's like a little thing left on the table
Mm-hmm.
that and I think one of the little crumbs on the table that I wanted to get at is that so much of the control scheme switching is influenced by all the work that Yoko Taro has done in like the Nier series and
Okay.
Drakengard, because they you go look at Nier Automata, they do the switching of control schemes, right? But that's kind of sometimes driven, it is used narratively, but often driven with a mechanical logic. Like it becomes a side-scrolling shmup, it becomes a top-down shmup, it becomes like and the little breadcrumb on the ground is like, okay, well, what if I'm just using that purely from a narrative place? What does that mean
Mm.
from like a theoretical framework of like what
Sure.
what are these things? Like
Yeah.
what can you do, that what can you use them for in games, and what do they mean, and what can they mean, I should say. Anyways, that's a long-winded answer to
That's a
why
great answer there.
that
Really
approach.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, that brings us to the end. Remy, it's been incredible. I've had to bite my tongue many a times to stop myself from asking more questions. But I really, really, really do appreciate you taking some time out of your day to come and speak to me and be on the podcast. So yeah, thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me, and thank you for
Remy,
I know sometimes I can
anytime,
start
mate.
rambling about this stuff.
If you're ever bored, you've got a spare hour, saying, "Well, I don't know what to do," just give me a call. I'll fire up the
Yeah,
mic, no problem.
for sure.
But as is customary at the end of a podcast, I would like to ask you if you can please just tell everyone that's listening where they can go to follow you, to keep up with your projects, and what's next for Sunset Visitor.
Yeah, so the best way to follow us is to follow our BlueSky handle, which is at sunsetvisitor.studio. On Twitter, it's 1000 at 1000xRESIST. And for myself, it's at remysiu.com on BlueSky. I don't really go on Twitter that much personally anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You can also join our Sunset Visitor Discord. We have a Discord, and it's very nice. People there are really nice, and they're really funny, and they do lots of fun things, like make fan art, and they made a whole fanzine.
That's right. Yeah.
And yeah,
I remember that.
it's wild. And coming up for Sunset Visitor is on, like, I don't know when this podcast will air, but on November 4th, we are bringing French, Korean, and Brazilian Portuguese localizations to the game, and then also simultaneously releasing the game on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. Yeah, and so beyond that, we are working on new things, but we can't really talk about those things too much just yet.
As you've just heard, I think we can all agree that that was an incredible conversation. It was such an honour to talk to Remy, and I think you can tell how nervous I was at the beginning of that interview. I did feel a little bit all over the place just because I was just so excited, nervous, and just lots of emotions kind of running all over the place. But we soon got comfortable, and I think we ended up having a wonderful conversation. I hope you enjoyed that too. I think it was quite informative. And I tried to ask questions that may not have been asked many times before. That's why there wasn't much about the language that was used in the game or other aspects that maybe Remy has been asked about before many times. There's all the interviews out there already, podcasts, written interviews and everything that goes more into that side of the game. So I hope you enjoyed the questions as much as I did asking them. I'm going to get out of here, but before I do, I'd just like to remind you all that we do have a Discord server where you can chat to the So Many Games crew and other like-minded people on video games, life, and our work. We'd love for you to be a part of our community, so come and say hello. Don't forget to keep an eye on our socials for our Patreon announcements and to check out somanygames.co.uk for our latest reviews, articles, and interviews. Links to all of that can be found in the show description. Guys, thank you so much for listening. You are why we make all of this, and we are, as always, eternally grateful to you for your support. You truly are amazing people. But until next time, my name has been Jason. Take care out there, and happy gaming.
Do you find yourself playing older games and wishing that there were new discussions about those games? Enter Tales from the Backlog. Hi, I'm Dave Jackson, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest to break down those games that may be stuck in your ever-expanding backlog. Each episode looks at one game in depth, focusing on mechanics, story, music, and other aspects with no spoilers until a clearly marked spoiler wall in the middle. If you've played the game, go ahead and climb that spoiler wall and enjoy in-depth story discussions, and if not, jump out when we warn you and maybe go play that game for yourself. We have over 100 episodes in the feed, everything from Disco Elysium to Tunic to discussion episodes about how to get into horror games, and if games actually need to be fun, or if they have more to offer. I guarantee that there's something in there for everybody. Once again, that's Tales from the Backlog, available wherever your podcasts are found.
Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories,
Immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds.
blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun, whatever fun is to you.
I'm Jeff Moonen,
And I am Matt, aka Stormageddon.
and on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there, so we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Jeff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.